Welcome. Good afternoon and happy spring to all of you. Thank you for joining. My name is Pat Furlong and I'm President and CEO of PPMD. Today's discussion is about Viltepso. This is NS Pharma's drug for those individuals who are amenable to skipping exon 53. We're joined today by Dr. Anna Perievsky and Dr. Suzanne Morgan. Just before we start, a little bit about each of these two physicians. Dr. Anna Perievsky is the West Coast Medical Science Liaison for NS Pharma. Prior to joining NS Pharma, Dr. Perievsky completed her PhD in neuroscience with a focus in neurodegenerative disease at UCLA. Additionally, she has a very diverse background in the study of memory, depression, and anxiety, and is a part-time biology instructor to future healthcare practitioners. Dr. Suzanne Morgan is the Director of Patient Services and National Accounts for NS Pharma. Suzanne leads the NS Support Program, which assists patients, caregivers, and providers to deliver the company's access services programs. She joined NS Pharma in January of 2020, and prior to that has held several pharmaceutical and biotech leadership roles across the development spectrum. She has received her PhD in organizational management with a specialty in women's leadership. So welcome, Anna, and welcome, Suzanne. And with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Anna.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat. So hi, everyone. Before I get started, I want to thank PPMD for allowing me the opportunity to speak to all of you today. I understand many of you were anticipating to hear from Dr. McDonald, but as he is unable to join us this morning, means you guys are stuck here with me for a little bit, and I know not quite the same, but I will be covering the same information and slides Dr. McDonald was planning on speaking to, and then also taking questions at the end. So on behalf of NS Pharma, as the title suggests, I'll be speaking about Viltepso, which is a weekly infusion for the treatment of Duchenne muscular dystrophy in patients amenable to exon 53 skipping. So before I dive in, I want to underline that continued approval for this indication is contingent upon verification and description of clinical benefit in a confirmatory phase 3 trial. In clinical studies, no patients experienced kidney toxicity during treatment with Viltepso. However, kidney toxicity from drugs like Viltepso may be possible, so serum cysteine T, urine dipstick, and urine protein to creatine ratio should be measured before starting and during treatment with Viltepso, and also consider measuring GFR before starting Viltepso. The most common adverse reactions included upper respiratory tract infection, injection site reaction, cough, and pyrexia. So to give you a quick roadmap of where I'm going, in the next few slides, I'll do a quick review on exon skipping, present clinical trial data on the efficacy of Viltepso, as well as its safety and tolerability profile, after which I'll pass it over to Suzanne, who will tell you about our patient support program. So, although rare, Duchenne muscular dystrophy is the most common form of inherited muscular disorders in childhood, affecting 1 in 3,500 to 5,000 live male births. Patients with Duchenne experience a progressive decrease in muscle function, leading to a loss of ambulation, respiratory failure, cardiac dysfunction, and premature death. Duchenne is rarely seen in girls, and when it is, it's usually milder than the phenotype observed in boys. As of today, there's no cure for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Most treatments are palliative and do not target the root molecular cause of the disease. Steroids are prescribed to reduce inflammation. Respiratory, cardiac, and physical therapy are administered as the disease progresses. On average, symptoms are first noticed at approximately 2.5 years old. Diagnosis often occurs a bit later, closer to 4 years old, and patients tend to lose ambulation between 10 and 12 years old. Therefore, the goal of Viltepso treatment is to slow disease progression and the rate of decline. So based on genetic data gathered from patients, approximately 8 to 10% of patients with Duchenne are amenable to exon 53 skipping. Patients with mutations such as deletions of exons 43 to 52, 45 to 52, 47 to 52, 48 to 52, 49 to 52, 50 to 52 and a single deletion of exon 52 alone are candidates for treatment with Viltepso. And this list is not exhaustive by any means, but these are the most common ones seen. Viltepso is a once-weekly 60-minute IV infusion administered at the approved dose of 80 milligrams per kilogram per week. And on the right is a cartoon illustrating the mechanism of action of Viltepso to give you an idea behind exon skipping. So a gene, let me pull up my, a gene in this case, the dystrophin gene, is made up of a strand of DNA pieces that all fit together like puzzle pieces. So you can see here the blue, the orange, and the green all fit together. So these puzzle pieces called exons click together when assembled in the right order. So in the first image of the healthy gene, all these pieces are neatly aligned, 2 green pieces, 2 orange pieces, and then the 3 blue pieces. If one of these puzzle pieces or exons is missing, like the orange piece in the second image, the puzzle pieces can no longer click together. So the green puzzle piece doesn't fit with the next orange piece. So when the pieces don't click together, the cell machinery doesn't know what to do with it, and dystrophin protein then isn't made. However, with Viltepso on board, the exon following the deleted sequence, so in this case, exon 53, as you can see in the picture, it's labeled, is skipped. Now the green puzzle piece can fit together with the blue puzzle piece. So while pre-treatment no dystrophin was made, post-treatment the muscle can now make a shortened dystrophin protein. The efficacy and safety of Viltepso were tested in 2 multi-center clinical trials, one in Japan and one in North America. So in this slide, the study designs and study endpoints are shown for each of the 2 trials. Study 1, the North America phase 2 trial shown here on the top, tested safety, tolerability, and dystrophin protein production via Western blot. Additional confirmatory dystrophin measurements, as well as the 6-minute walk test, time to climb, time to run, walk, time to stand, North Star, and a muscle strength test made up the secondary endpoints. 16 boys participated in the study. After a 4-week placebo-controlled period, 8 received the 40 milligram per kilogram per week dose, while the other 8 received the 80 milligram per kilogram per week dose of Viltepso for an additional 20 weeks. Muscle biopsies were collected and analyzed for dystrophin at the 25-week check-in. So all 16 participants were then given the option to continue on their respective doses and chose to participate in the open-label 160-week-long extension study. Study 2, shown on the bottom, the Japanese phase 1-2 trial, measured dystrophin production and localization as its primary endpoints, as well as safety, pharmacokinetics, motor function, muscle strength, and serum CK level test as its secondary endpoints. The study has also had 16 participants, looked at the 40 and 80 milligram per week or per kilogram per week doses, and muscle biopsies were collected at 12 weeks in 8 of the boys and 24 weeks in the other 8 boys. Viltepso is the only approved exon skipping treatment tested in boys as young as 4. The average ages of the 16 study participants were 7.5 and 7.2 years of age for the 40 and 80 milligram per kg per week doses, respectively. Additionally, the age range as well as the weight, height, BMI demographics per dose and across the study can be seen in this table. So to be included in the study, the boys had to have a confirmed Duchenne muscular dystrophy diagnosis with a mutation amenable to exon 53 skipping, be of ages 4 to under 10, able to walk independently, able to complete the time to stand, time to run, walk, and time to climb assessments, have normal clinical safety laboratory test results, and have been on a stable glucocorticoid dose for at least 3 months prior to study entry and for the entire duration of the study. So this graph shows the dystrophin levels of the 8 boys who received 80 milligram per kg per week of Viltepso in study 1. At baseline, prior to treatment, the boys had an average of 0.6% of normal dystrophin, and after 20 to 24 weeks of treatment, because remember a few of the boys were on a placebo for the first 4 weeks of the trial to assess safety, the average dystrophin levels increased significantly to 5.9% of normal. Just to break these data down a bit further, baseline and post-treatment dystrophin levels of each participant who was on the 80 milligram per kg per week dose are illustrated on this slide. All patients exhibited an increase in dystrophin levels with respect to baseline. 88% or 7 of the 8 participants showed an increase of 3% or higher. This is important as in recent studies of muscle biopsies from patients with Becker muscular dystrophy and Duchenne muscular dystrophy, modestly higher dystrophin levels, those above 2%, were associated with better functional outcome and with older age at loss of ambulation relative to other patients with Duchenne. So we were very pleased to see that most of the participants in the study were able to reach this level of dystrophin after just the 20 to 24 weeks of treatment. And making dystrophin is important, but once made, it's just as important that the dystrophin protein finds its way to where it needs to be able to do its job. So immunofluorescence studies were conducted to verify the localization of the newly made dystrophin. In these two images on the right, both the top and the bottom, co-localization of dystrophin and 2 other muscle-associated proteins is shown as the overlap of green and red, which appears as yellow. So Viltepso resulted in a significant increase in the number of dystrophin-positive fibers, which is what you want to see. No significant adverse events, drug-related adverse events, discontinuations due to adverse events, or deaths were reported. The most common adverse reactions were upper respiratory tract infections, injection site reactions, cough, and fever, and some additional reactions are listed in the table. I'll give you guys a second to scroll through that. So to wrap up, Viltepso is administered at 80 milligrams per kg by a weekly intravenous infusion. The exact amount of Viltepso to be administered is calculated based on each patient's individual weight. The infusion takes place over 60 minutes and can be administered at a treatment center or by a healthcare professional at the family's home. And in summary, 100% of patients who received Viltepso showed an increase in dystrophin levels. 88% had dystrophin levels of 3% or above at the end of the study. No significant or drug-related adverse effects were reported, and treatment could be administered at a treatment center or the comfort of a patient's home. So these are all the slides I have. So now I will pass it over to Suzanne, who will introduce and review the patient support services, and we'll take all the questions at the end. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Pereyevsky. That was an excellent overview of Viltepso. And like Anna just said, my name is Suzanne Morgan. I am the Director of Patient Services here at NS Pharma and also National Account Director. I started, like Pat said, about a year ago, and my first week on the job, I was at a San Diego meeting for PPMD where I met Pat and her staff and was just overwhelmed and so impressed with the organization, Pat herself, and all of the advocacy that goes out for the Duchenne community. So really proud to be here, excited to be here, and so thank you. So my job is to talk to you a little bit about who NS Pharma is, also talk to you about the NS support and the services. So first of all, who is NS Pharma? Well, we are a wholly owned subsidiary of a larger company called Nippon Shinyaku out of Kyoto, Japan. And Nippon Shinyaku is about 102 years old of a company, and when you put that into perspective, we have companies in the U.S. like J&J and General Electric that are old and established and have established a lot of trust, and that's who Nippon Shinyaku is in Japan. They have a rich history of research and development. They focus on several disease states, one of which is rare disease. And NS Pharma, who is located in Paramus, New Jersey, our main focus is orphan rare disease. NS Pharma is the sponsor of the North American Phase 2 trial, also the global sponsor of our Phase 3 trial that started enrolling patients in October of 2019. I think also that's important is NS Pharma is a pipeline product company, meaning that we have several more products coming to the market eventually for Duchenne. So we are here to stay and we're here to serve. So thank you for that. So who is NS Support? I have to say that I myself am a mother of a patient or a son, with a chronic illness. So when I have the opportunity to start to create NS Support, I keep that in mind. I'm a mother first. And so we wanted to create a program that was both personalized and customized, that is there for support. I know that a diagnosis of Duchenne can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of things to think about, such as medical care, payers, support services. And so we wanted to make sure that we created something that could get you the resources you need for you to feel supported and to understand the journey that your patient, that your sons are in. And no matter where they are in the journey, whether they're newly diagnosed, they're 14 or 24, we want to make sure that we are there for you. Through that, we do a rapid benefit investigation, and I will explain what that means later. We also, for the commercial patients, have a copay assistance program once we have determined eligibility. One of the greatest things we do is we help give insights about the infusion options, where to have Viltepso infused, whether it's the hospital outpatient department, an infusion center, home infusion, or even a physician's office. And like I said earlier, we intend and anticipate to always have ongoing and highly responsive support through our NS Support and follow-up calls to make sure that you are getting all of your questions answered. So who exactly is the NS Support team? Well, this team is amazing. I'm very proud to explain each of these roles. They all work together in tandem to support. The first role is our case manager, and these are specialists who do provide ongoing personalized support. They help manage the access, the reimbursement, and the care coordination for the patients with DMD. Their role is to call the payers, to verify benefits, find out where the most cost-effective and easy place is to get the infusion. They take all of that information and they put that into a letter for you to explain your benefits, which would also explain your copays, your deductibles, how all of that affects your family out of pocket. And they do that through something called a welcome call. The next role is our directors of patient access, and these are internal people that work for NS Pharma themselves. I love this group. They have over 100 years of combined experience between being office medical practice management, hospital and home infusion pharmacy management, home infusion nursing, and payer account management. So any question that comes up regarding reimbursement and getting coverage, these ladies know what they're talking about. This group works in tandem with your provider to efficiently secure access to the therapy. And during this process, it may include prior authorization support, which I will talk about on the next slide. Also things like exceptions, denials, and appeals support, and also the coordination between your provider and the site of care. They work on identifying a site of care that's acceptable to you and your physician, and also based on your payer's coverage. This, like I said, could be a hospital, a home infusion, or even an infusion center. But overall, this team, the directors of patient access, they work in unison with the case managers at NS Support and our patient engagement leads to provide the best possible solutions for any challenging and accessing therapy. And our final role here is the patient engagement lead, and this is our fastest growing position at NS Pharma. And these people, they're dedicated resources, and they work directly with you, the caregivers and the patients, to help you along the way, the journey, to overcome obstacles, to talk to you about what's happening with your home infusion, what's happening with the payers, et cetera. So they are an absolute personalized position for you to talk to. And between the three of these positions, like I said, we hope that you feel supported and get all of your questions answered. So what are the services that NS Support provides? So I mentioned something called a rapid benefit investigation and verification. And if you kind of look over this slide, to some of you, these words, these terminologies may be new. To some of you, they may be well known. And so I'm going to just briefly explain what each of them mean and do. So for benefit investigation, what that is when we get something called a start form that comes into NS Support. This will have all of your insurance information on it. We recommend giving your provider all of your insurance cards, whether it's a primary or a secondary or a governmental insurance. These case managers then call the payers and they get all of your benefits to understand what is your hospital copay, what would your infusion copay be at the home health agency. They get all of that information together within a day, and then they call you, like I said, on the welcome call and explain your benefits. So if you're new to this world, they will talk to you in whatever manner it takes to explain so you understand exactly what your benefits are, what your choices are. And then during that time also, if you do have commercial insurance only, they will roll you into something that's called the copay program, which would cover the cost of Viltepso for commercial insured people. The next orange box is called prior authorization assistance. So our payers across the country, they create policy based on all of these products. They take the scientific data and they, as each plan is different, decide what they feel would be the appropriate patients for Viltepso. Some policies are very generous. Those are the ones we like. Some policies are a little more restrictive, and those are the ones that we fight with. But whatever the policy is, they give you something called they give the healthcare provider, something called a prior authorization form. Your provider then answers their questions, and then they determine if they want to cover Viltepso. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but we have the group, the patients of the directors of patient access to help get you approved through things called exceptions and appeals. This is when the directors of patient access work with your provider. Sometimes things called a letter of a medical necessity is needed to just provide a little more information about the patient to make sure that the plan understands this is the appropriate patient so they can approve Viltepso for you. During this time, also, you would know also where the best place to be infused would be. You'd be working with your provider to determine that. And like I said, during all of this, we have ongoing support. We can call you weekly or when new pieces of information come up. But whatever you would like is how we determine how often to call. And now there is two types of insurance. We have commercial insurance, and those would be your Anthems, United, Cigna, some of those larger groups, or even smaller regional plans. And then there's government insurance, and this would be Medicaid, Medicare, TRICARE, government. Whatever insurance you have, if you have a combination of those insurances, NS Support will verify the benefits to determine what your coverage is, and then we also fight to help make sure that you can afford and get on these products if at all possible. And new patients can start this whole process by getting a start form, which I will talk to you about at the end. I've mentioned this a few times now, and this is for commercially insured patients. It's called our copay assistance program. When you get your welcome packet after we have called and talked to you about your benefits, this card will be in that mail, and this is for you to present to wherever you get infused. It covers the entire cost of Viltepso at a $0 copay for you. Now, there may be some places that still may charge you for the actual infusion, but the copay card does cover the cost of Viltepso. Also, the out-of-pocket costs are covered up to that should be $20,000, not $20. And this is when it can help pay down your deductibles and your out-of-pocket for your family insurance. So these copay cards that companies issue are very helpful for products and drugs like Viltepso. Also, every year, as long as you're eligible, we just re-enroll you in this copay program, so you do not have to worry about re-enrolling yourself. And for those patients that have no insurance, we also have a patient's assistance program. There is a criteria for that, and if that is something that you are interested in, your physician can help fill out those forms for our patient assistance program. Additionally, there are lots of foundations out there to help you with services, not just covering the cost of drugs, but wheelchairs and other things. We at NS Support check these foundations weekly to see if there are funds that are available to help you with other types of financial assistance. And all of this starts with something we call the patient start form. And this is where you would fill out, actually your healthcare provider would fill out the patient information section, listing all of your insurance information. And this form will need two signatures, one from either the caregiver, if your child is under 18, or the child, if it's over 18, can certainly sign, and then also your healthcare provider would need to sign. So once we have both of those signatures, we start the benefit verification process to let you know what your benefits would be. And you can also obtain this form at viltepso.com, or you can call NS Support at 833-NS-SUPRT, which is also 833-677-8778. And so this is the conclusion of my portion, but just as an overcap, the NS Support Program has three different specialties trying to help with coverage and get your child on product, between the case manager, these directors of patient access, or a patient engagement lead. We do all the verifications of benefits. We help with prior authorizations, appeals, exceptions, and denials, and we keep in contact with you so you know where you are every step of the journey, to provide a comprehensive care coordination and resources for patients, caregivers, and healthcare providers. So the NS Support number is in the light blue. And then also, if you do have other questions for medical information, we have our medical information line at 866-677-4276 or 866-NS Pharma. And that is the conclusion of my portion. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, both Anna and Suzanne. That was very helpful. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go back through the slides. We have some questions that have come in, but I also have some questions. So I'm going to go back through them and sort of take it one by one. So if we can go back to slide 2, it would be very helpful.
I'm working on it. Here we go.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
I'll give you a second here. All right. So I'm
assuming that
this. Okay. So in slide 2, when you mentioned the side effects or potential side effects, can you, and this looks like this is part of the label, or certainly part of the label here. You mentioned the side effects. Can you tell us the frequency of the side effects? And you also sort of said some of the side effects, such as GFR. Could you give a little explanation of what you saw and how frequently you saw them?
Yeah, so as far as the side effects, they're actually on this slide as far as the frequency, and these are the frequency in the 80 milligram per kg per week dose group, and that's the dose that's approved. So that's what's shown in this table, so you can see the frequency on here. They are all in the label as well, so the prescribers will have all this information if you want to see it after today. I mentioned we didn't see any kidney adverse effect in our trial, and that's true for the North America trial, which is the data I presented here. That's also true for the Japanese phase 1, phase 2 trial that I briefly mentioned. and that continues to be true for the ongoing long-term extension trial that we've been running for several years now. However, the kidney effects are now, per the FDA, considered more of a drug class effect. And so per the FDA recommendation and from our label, we are recommending kidney monitoring, so a baseline check before the initiation of treatment, as well as continuous treatment, kind of depending on the test. Some are every 3 months and some are less frequent, just based on, like I said, FDA recommendations as they are considering potential kidney effects just as a class, a drug class here.
Right. Thank you. So I just wanted to drill down a little bit. You mentioned pyrexia, urticaria. I'd like you to explain what pyrexia and urticaria are. And in the study where you're showing, considerable number of people experience these things, is it in the short term, like during the infusion? Is it in the long term, following throughout the week? Can you just kind of drill down on what and explain this a little bit more in more detail?
Yeah. 1 second. So pyrexia is just fever, and it could be a very light fever, so anything above normal. Urticaria is hives, so any something that looks like an allergy, so like a skin hive. And I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, it just means anywhere just throughout the duration of the trial. So directly after infusion or any time during the 24-week enrollment period.
Okay. So it's not something that we see accompanying during an infusion, or it just after the infusion we don't see elevated temps or itching or hives or those kinds of things routinely. These are just things that happen during the course of the trial, intermittently over the course of the trial in these 16 individuals who participated. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And so you're seeing the numbers. So for example, for the pyrexia, there was 19 occurrences. Some of those could have been within the same patient, right, several times. So just 19 incidents of a reported fever throughout that 24-week time period, not necessarily directly post-infusion or anything like that.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify that. So, sometimes especially when you're starting a new drug, you sort of get, worried about what's going to happen as this infusion takes place. Can I expect that there'll be hives, et cetera, or an elevated temp? So I think it's very important to say that these are things that occurred over the course of the trial, but must be included in the label.
Correct. Yep, that's correct.
All right, let's go to slide 5.
Yep.
All right. So I think it's very important to understand and sort of reflect on the fact that within this 53 amenable population, you have, if my count is right, at least 6 different mutations all amenable to exon 53. Is that correct?
Yeah, and these, again, by no means is that the full list. These are probably the most common mutations that we see. These are the mutations that we saw that were seen in the study participants, but I am sure there are different mutations that a geneticist can help identify and pinpoint as a mutation or a deletion that's amenable to 53 skipping.
Right. Yeah, and sorry, there's 7. I miscounted. So I think it's really important to say or to think about, or maybe you can confirm or not, in terms of within each of these amenable mutations, skipping exon 53 provides an in-frame protein. And not all in-frame proteins are going to be alike, which could account for some of the variability that you saw in terms of expression. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly, very much. So what Viltepso does is, in addition to the deletion that's already present, skips 53. So like you mentioned, the resulting protein is a shortened, truncated protein, but the part that's truncated, right, is going to be the original deletion plus exon 53. So exactly, that resulting protein is going to be different in different participants depending on kind of what was originally there. So that could be one of the reasons for the differences that we see in the dystrophin numbers. There could be a whole lot of reasons, right? We see the differences in the dystrophin numbers, but absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I just think it's important to understand that these are in-frame proteins, and what we typically see and understand about an in-frame protein is that you're expressing dystrophin, and we link that up with a Becker phenotype. But we have to understand that there are different proteins expressed here and lots of other factors that contribute to how a person feels, functions, and survives, right, in terms of benefit of outcomes in terms of slowing disease progression, improving muscle health, or halting disease progression. So I just wanted to make that clear that we're looking at a number of different proteins when we're skipping exon 53, or for that matter, any of the other exons that are available to be skipped at this moment and in the future. All right, so if we'll go to number 6.
Yes.
Okay, so you've done basically a low dose and a high dose and landed on the 80 mg per kg dose. One of my questions around here was, as you explored this, not in the clinical realm, how did you get to these doses? And you chose the 80 milligrams based on the increased expression. We're just familiar with lower doses, so a little bit of sort of detail around the dose, the choice of doses, and how you landed at 80.
Sure. I mean, the data that I'm presenting here, the data that you're seeing here is from our phase 2 North America study. So that's to say there was a phase 1 dose finding study. So there was an original study done preclinically in animals, and then a dose finding study done in patients as well. And so at that point, we had much lower doses and titrated up to higher doses. And really, I'm going to, leave the decisions up to our R&D department, but the decision is absolutely made based on the trade-off between the dystrophin numbers and the safety profile of the drug. And with I think the consensus in the field seems to be the more dystrophin, the better, right? And so the goal is really to make more dystrophin at the kind of lowest safety cost. And with a very good safety profile that we saw, they deemed that 80 made sense. And again, and this was confirmed by that study that's mentioned at the bottom here, the Japanese trial as well, where they also studied the 2 doses, also looked at the dystrophin numbers and the safety profile there as well.
Right. I'm really thankful that you talked about the Japanese study that was really a dose-finding study that was done prior to this study that was done in the United States, where you did test the various doses and came to the United States with the 2 that you thought would be useful in terms of going forward. To balance the safety and efficacy to make sure you had a safe and a drug that expressed dystrophin and landed on 80 milligrams per kilogram, which was approved in the United States with an accelerated approval pathway, and that means the approval for this drug was based on a surrogate. The surrogate was expression of dystrophin. Now, the follow-on studies will further confirm that expression of dystrophin provides benefit to the patients who are amenable to 53 skip. But I think it's important to understand how you get to a dose and how you land on that dose, and then how that is sort of sticks into place with the approval process and further studies. All right.
Absolutely. And that 80 milligram per dose is also based on the Japanese trial approved in Japan as well.
Right. And so when we're talking about approvals, it is approved now in Japan and the United States. What is the process, or are you considering, or what's the next steps in terms of getting this approved in other countries such as Australia or Europe? How are you thinking of those things, and do you have to run studies, or do those regulatory agencies accept a submission to Japanese and or FDA in the United States?
Yeah, so the goal is absolutely to, get approval to everybody who wants it and to get international approval. That is very much the end goal here. But as far as now, I don't know if I have much comment towards that as far as dates and the process. I'm going to leave that to our regulatory team to take on in the future. But like I said, something we definitely are shooting for and have in mind. I just don't have any timelines or anything like that for that.
Okay. All right, that's fair. But there are plans. So hopefully we will hear more about that in the future. So if we could go to slide number 10.
So you said 10?
10, yes, please.
Okay.
So just sort of some basic understanding of dystrophin. Once you can get dystrophin expressed, it sticks around for a while. So you're giving an infusion every single week. So are you looking at the cumulative effect and as you have shown in the trial with the dystrophin expression levels that are greater than 3% and varied across some of the individuals? Do you expect or anticipate with a cumulative effect of a person being on 6 months to a year that you would see that if you were to biopsy, and I know we're not biopsying all these patients, but are you anticipating that there will be a cumulative effect from long-term use of Viltepso?
So I can only comment based on data that we have seen. So I mentioned in the Japanese trial. So in this North America trial, that's what this picture is from. We did a biopsy at baseline, so prior to treatment, and then we did a biopsy at the 25-week visit. So for these guys, I only have the 2 time points. And but for the Japanese trial, half of the participants were biopsied at 12 weeks, half were biopsied at 24. Based on that trial, we did see more dystrophin at the 24-week biopsy than at the 12-week biopsy. So there is definitely somewhat of a cumulative effect as far as restoring and building and increasing dystrophin levels. How long that lasts and what the time period is that it accumulates over, at what point does it maxes out? Unfortunately, those are answers I don't have. So does it max out at 24 weeks? Is it a year? Is it 5 years? We just haven't done that, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, just thinking about the biology here, I think it really, in terms of benefit to a person, it really depends on age and stage and how much muscle mass is there to get dystrophin expressed, right? So you would see it, you couldn't really predict. I'm just suggesting that when you're expressing dystrophin, because it does stick around for a while, for weeks, and depends on who you talk to, how many of those weeks, I think that we should, theoretically, see a cumulative effect of getting exon, that particular exon skipped, and a dystrophin expression. So this is given every single week, and if dystrophin stays along longer than a week, you would anticipate some accumulation within the muscle, and therefore, if we are accepting the hypothesis that dystrophin expression is going to protect muscle, which I think we've seen, then I think that this really is really important for our community to understand. One of the questions along the way has been, these individuals are getting weekly infusions. If they miss a week, have they missed a week in terms of your experience in the commercial arena? And is that concerning, or how does that work? And is that worrisome? And is the interval between doses really specifically 7 days, or is there variability?
So I can only really speak to what's been studied, right, and what's per label. And so I do think there's a tiny bit of leeway there in case, we're all human, things happen, appointments get canceled, people get stuck in traffic, whatever. So I am sure has been cases of somebody skipping a dose or getting one a day early, a day late. However, just per label from where I'm at, I do have to recommend that infusions are done every 7 days. I haven't seen any data or haven't heard anything reported of what happens if that's altered. So the answer is I don't know if that's been done and what happens, but I would recommend following the label on this one.
Great. And let's go to slide 13.
Yep.
Just a couple questions. I think it's terrific that these young men do not have to, and some women who are amenable to 53 do not have to go to their neurology clinic, for instance, or their certified center to receive their therapy. So you're offering it at home, which is terrific if patients are comfortable with that, or at an infusion center also comfortable. Tell me a little bit about, are you recommending ports, or is this up to the clinician? And are you seeing increased number of patients and families interested in getting a port? Can you just speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're not recommending for or against ports. I know in our North America trial we did have a patient with a port, and he did as well as everybody else as far as adverse events or anything like that. So we're definitely not recommending against them or for them. That is very much at the discretion of the prescribing physician. I know I've talked to several doctors about this. They all kind of have their own theory depending on, the patient's age, where infusions are being done. Are they traveling? Are they not? Just their lifestyle. Are they in school? Are they not? So we are leaving that up to the discretion of the doctors, but we don't have a recommendation for or against either way.
Okay. But it could be, theoretically, the clinician can write for it because, as we know, boys with Duchenne really have some trouble often getting into those veins. So especially when you're talking about a weekly infusion, sometimes it might be easier at least to have a discussion with your clinician about the port placement to just lessen the impact and the hardship of going into a vein that sometimes doesn't want to cooperate with us as we
right, absolutely. And if that's preferred by the family, then absolutely recommend asking and discussing that with the prescribing physician. Because, like I said,
right.
as far as we're on our no, go
and
ahead.
having a port doesn't mean that the possibility of home infusion or infusion center doesn't eliminate that possibility.
I don't believe so, but Suzanne, if you know something different.
Yeah, great question. So I can tell you that I'm on a lot of calls with our home infusion companies as they're preparing to bring nurses into the home, and I hear about quite a few patients that have ports. So it's happening out there. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I can just tell you in the real world setting, we do have patients on ports.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think what we're seeing across the Antisense world is that port placement does not eliminate the possibility of getting a home infusion or an infusion at an infusion center. It doesn't make the patient need to go back to the clinic. So I think I just wanted to make sure that was clear, and certainly, those little veins are sometimes really troublesome to get into. Yeah. All right, slide number 15, please.
Okay, that would be mine. Let's see here. Did I hit it? Oh, wait, there we go. Okay.
You did, and so we're really pleased. Many of us are familiar with J&J in this country, and certainly now with COVID, we are familiar with the J&J vaccine and all of the other things that J&J does. It certainly is a very reputable company in the U.S., as is NS Pharma and Nippon Shinyaku. I can never say it, and I apologize, Shinyaku. They've done, so we're really thrilled with their interest in exon skipping in Duchenne muscular dystrophy because, as you know, that's our heart right now in this community. And you mentioned that they are committed to this rare disease in Duchenne. Probably putting you on the line, but they have a portfolio in Duchenne, and you can say yes or no, and you can tell us if you're allowed to talk about that portfolio or if you know about it and its status.
Gosh, Pat, that's a great question. So I do know that we have a portfolio. I do know that we are currently researching in trials more exon skippers. I think that might be the only thing I can say without getting in any more trouble. But yes, we are committed to the Duchenne community, absolutely.
Well, I can quickly, not much more information, but I can add that there is a trial posted. It is by Nippon Shinyaku. It is being done in Japan. It is very early. It is our dose-finding study for an exon skipper for exon 44, and that one is announced and posted.
Good. And that's
what's released for now.
And So I'd love to nail you down to the time frame of when can we see it open in other countries, but I know you can't answer that right now. So we'll look forward to more news on that. Really thrilled
of course.
for Exon 44 skip. As you know, we have approvals in the United States on 53, 51, 45. So adding to the portfolio on 44 would be really wonderful for our community. So we'll look forward to additional news on this. If we go to
Absolutely.
16.
What slide did you say, Pat? 16? Okay.
16, yes.
Yeah,
thanks,
okay.
Suzanne. So it's
Sure.
the support you described is really very nice and very helpful. You know, there are people from outside of our country on the phone today and asking about, so how, or is there a way, if you live in Australia or if you live in Europe or if you live in any country, to access this approved product that is now approved in both the U.S. and Japan? And one of the questions was, is it just 24 weeks? No, this is a therapy that you would get every week for the rest of your life. And so if you could, Suzanne, just kind of speak to, is there a way? Is there a model? Is there a plan? Or is there a way to access this particular drug if the person of interest has a mutation that's amenable to 53 that lives outside U.S. and Japan?
That's a great question. I am very familiar with how to get it in the U.S., and so I'm not sure how to get it outside of the U.S., but if that person wants to reach out to me or the company through NS Support, we can certainly try to get them more information, and that's what I know. I don't know how to get it in Australia or any other country.
Yeah, I think a direct contact to you or to someone to begin thinking through how to answer these questions. You know, as you know, when you have a therapy that is demonstrating a greater than 2% dystrophin expression, which is interpreted and assumed and expected to provide benefit to the patient, when you see it approved in a few countries and not your own, it is heartbreaking to know that there's something that can help and the access isn't there. So I think really working hard with this community to see if there's a way forward would be really useful. So I thank you for that, and maybe we can post your email address so they can contact you directly. That would be great.
That'd be great. I'd love to help in any way that I can. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Slide 18, please.
Yes.
So you discussed this a little bit, and you talked about the form, which is in a later slide, and I think that slide is a little bit later on. But I want to stick here.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a parent or a patient, and or my son is amenable to 53 skip, do you have a recommendation? So is it an idea for me to download the form that you've described and fill out as much as I can and take it to my clinic? Does that really sort of help facilitate or speed the process, or can you give us some advice on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as these physicians are getting more and more used to Exon skippers for a patient and parent to come in with that form, saying that you're interested in knowing what your benefits would be perfect. And then you'd already have the signature right there. I can say, though, that if your doctor and the caregiver patient discusses something like Viltepso and you're not in the office, I know that with COVID not everyone's able to get there as much as they want. We do have DocuSign where we can send you via email the signature portion, so you don't have to be live to get that signature on the form. But yes, it'd be great to download it and take it into your physician. That would be great.
And in the case of a call, when I as a person am calling the support network, do you have some recommendations, Suzanne? What should I have at hand, to address this call, right? Do I need my insurance? Do I need my son or my own medical record? What will I need to make this call go really smoothly?
Yeah, so the best thing is for you to get your insurance information to your physician to fill out on this form. That's the most important thing. Of course, your address and the best time to call and the best number, because as we reach out to call, we want to make sure, people work. Evenings are sometimes better, et cetera. We want to make sure that we have all of that information available. So the key thing is make sure you have all of your insurance cards available. If you have a Medicaid plan with your commercial or whatever, have all of that available. And fill out the form to the best of your ability. It just helps us provide better service.
Great. Thank you. Let's go to slide 18 and 19. I know we're getting near the end of the hour, so I'm going to try to condense my questions into one. So
yeah,
you talked about a copay, and you talked about support for the copay, which is terrific. And on the other slide, we talked about the little card and that it shouldn't exceed $20, and also foundations who are offering support. So this is a question about wait time. As you know, when there's a therapy approved and you fit into that category of amenable to 53, and you know that every minute matters, have you experienced long waits between the first time that form is filled out and the process to get the actual day of infusion started? And can you give us a little time frame about, is it a month, 6 weeks, is it forever? Can you give us a little bit of insight into how long it takes?
Absolutely, and that is such a great question, because I think that for the most part, when you are wanting to get something like Viltepso, you're going to have to be patient, because the plans are going to take a certain amount of time to make their decision. It's going to take a certain amount of time for the physicians to get all the information, the labs, the walk tests, the chart notes over to the plan. So all of this happens, and this elongates this wait time. I have seen Viltepso get approved in as fast as a day to get onto therapy. I have seen it still lingering 4 to 6 months at this point. We've been out 8. So I think it's important to set the expectations that this could be a long time. There may be appeals that have to occur. There may be external appeals that have to occur. But I can tell you that we at NS Support and NS Pharma are fighting all the way to get you on Viltepso if that's what you want. So, but great question. It is not an overnight process. We wish it was a pharmacy drug where it's a ping and you get it, but it just hasn't. We haven't seen that yet. But in time, as payers get more accustomed to things like Viltepso, those times do shorten. But for right now, it's still a bit of a few months. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to set expectations, and I agree with you. The longer and the more experience we have, the we'll and you will work out the kinks. But it's important to know that there are kinks, and because I'm a very impatient person. Any of my team will tell you I'm not very patient. So I would expect the form filled out, and then the next day someone arrive at my house. So I just wanted to set expectations on that. And if we can go to slide 20.
Sure. This is 20, the copay?
Yeah, and the $20,000. We talked about covering the drug itself, right? So this is your support copay assistance program pays for Viltepso, the drug. But there are other costs associated with a nurse coming to your house in a home infusion, or going to an infusion center, or for that matter, going to a clinic. How is that covered, and is this $20,000 you mentioned able to cover that as well as the out-of-pocket costs, or how? Can you give us a little insight there?
Yeah, great question. So we definitely put there because if someone goes into a hospital outpatient department or even a home infusion, there still may be charges that home infusion company is going to charge. I don't know what the charge might be. We just want to let people know that could occur. But when you have something like Viltepso, let's say you have a deductible, of $500. That copay card starts to go towards that $500 so that eventually you can hit your max so that there's no out-of-pocket cost. So that's the beauty of these copay programs that the companies offer. So that's kind of how that works. Does that answer your question? Was I kind of clear on that? And that should be $20,000, not $20. At least that's what I see on my screen.
No. That's why I asked. $20 certainly wouldn't cover infusion costs in the United States.
No.
I think we can all agree to that one. So I wanted to thank you. We do have one question that I'm going to answer. I'd like you to comment on, and it is, what does an increase of approximately 5% expression do? And I think the real answer of that is the jury's out on this. Because there's a lot of other factors. factors. I think that as a community, we know that getting dystrophin back into muscle is likely to cause benefit. How much benefit? I think we won't be able to predict. It's based on age and stage and many other factors, to include genetic modifiers and other things that occur in our bodies. But I'd love you to comment on 5% expression. If we can get to that in everyone, I think we could be thankful and wish for more. But that's certainly a good start. And I think the real answer is we're still learning. We believe expressing dystrophin in muscle would be incredibly important and useful, but the jury's out in terms of what we see as the full benefit. And I'll go back to steroids. You know, the first year of steroids, you can say, well, that this child or this individual is doing a little better, but it's not until we're about 5 or 10 years out that we decide how much benefit and how much risk that particular corticosteroid has cost in terms of, that benefit and risk. So I think that the jury is out on that. The last question, so comment on the percent expression and likely benefit. And the last thing is, are you able to discuss what the price per month would be if someone was paying out of pocket completely?
You're asking if
so Anna,
okay, so if they were...
You take the 5%.
Oh. Okay.
So what do you
so
think 5%?
So as far as the 5%, I think, so what you said is 100% on point, and I couldn't have said it better myself. I think, what we know comes from several studies and some literature and some publications. There's been studies done in, a lot of this comes from studies done in Becker patients, for example, where we can see their phenotype. Some patients look very good or don't express any symptoms until significantly later in life, and it turns out that they're only making 5% dystrophin, right? And so we're hopeful that that's what it could look like for some people. But again, that comes from a handful of studies, a handful of patients, and we very much understand that that's going to depend on age started, age diagnosed, type of deletion, type of any other genetic factors, epigenetic factors. And so, like you said, the jury is very much still out with, some of these trials lasting several months, right? Our long-term trial lasting several years, that's still, we don't quite know, right, what that's going to look like over a lifetime of treatment. So, I'm just going to leave it at that.
So we have a lot to learn, but it is exciting.
Yeah.
We have now a therapy for individuals who are amenable to exon 53 skip, and it's a PMO. The safety's been pretty well established. We'll learn more over time, and certainly very hopeful for the outcome for people who are amenable to this. Last question, Suzanne, I don't know if you're allowed to give it. You can just say yes or no. What's the cost of the treatment per month? I know it's based on weight, so the cost would be variable, and it would be based on weight. And I don't know if you want to just confirm that or not.
Yeah, it's definitely based on weight, and so that would be a definite sliding scale. I think, did you ask me per week or did you ask me per month? If someone did want to, go ahead. If someone wanted to pay out of pocket, it would be probably close to $10,000 a week, depending on the weight of the patient. That's why we definitely offer copay programs and government insurance if available. Yes.
Great. Well, thank you both, Anna and Suzanne. Thank you for joining us today. And to all of you who joined us today, I hope you find this information helpful. We will be posting it online. I wish you a really happy spring and look forward to more news from NS about this exon skipping drug and their entire portfolio. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, Pat. You have a great day. Bye.
You too.
Bye. Bye-bye.